Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Holy Plot. This is just James and Jacob today, no Liam, and we just saw Godzilla Minus One. We got an early screening, and we wanted to talk about it because we had a lot that we loved about this movie. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jacob. What did you think of Godzilla Minus One?
Yeah, so it's a shame that Liam's not here because he's such a big Godzilla guy, but I do think we have a lot to say about this movie. Right off the bat, I'm just going to give this a 10 out of 10. I absolutely thought it was fantastic. I thought this is exactly what movies need to be nowadays. And I totally think it's worth your time. I think it's worth $15 or whatever it costs to go to the movies. I cannot recommend it enough. It is totally worth your time. So go see the movie. I'm sure you're gonna like the review, but go see the movie first. I would recommend this to basically anybody. And I think it's really cool that we are getting a Japanese-made film this week and next week that are gonna be nationally distributed in America in IMAX. That is very cool.
I think post Parasite, we're starting to see a lot more.
Yeah,
of that.
and I felt that a lot in this movie. If you're not acquainted with Godzilla, which is okay because I kind of wasn't either, Godzilla is very different when he's tackled in Japan. He's a Japanese character, and in America, it's kind of CGI monster action figures being smashed together. But in Japan, Godzilla represents a lot about the tragedy and hardship the culture goes through, and seeing a movie like this will make you understand that. In the past, it's been tackled with Hiroshima, Nagasaki, natural disasters, and in this movie, in my opinion, what I gleaned from it, and this could be just my interpretation, but I think it's fair, that this movie is about the Tokyo fire bombings. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so just right from the beginning, the setting of the movie where the characters live is Tokyo.
Yeah, the main character arrives in Tokyo in this rubbled state. And I think this is overlooked a little bit, this event. But what I loved so much about it is that this is not really what I think Godzilla's tackling in this movie. It is what it's tackling, but what Godzilla kind of serves in this movie is to show how the Japanese people, civilians, had to band together and rebuild Japan, culturally and economically, which is such a crazy concept, because when you think of Godzilla, I think it's fair to say that it lends itself more to a disaster, to a crisis. And of course, I do think this movie is about Japan, is about Tokyo and the fire bombings that occurred there. But I think it's more about how the people recovered from it.
I think also that the movie is about overcoming the grief and the lingering effects of it, because we have a main character in this movie he's recalling Godzilla along with other traumas, and Godzilla is kind of bringing back the trauma of the Tokyo bombings on these people, on the veterans who band together. You're talking about the citizens, and they even get together when they're having to talk about fighting Godzilla, and they're like, we don't want to do this again.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a very blatant line in the movie where one of the characters, and I forget who it was, goes, we cannot trust the Japanese government, we cannot trust the American government, we gotta deal with this ourselves. And that legitimately blew me away. I think if you're a fan of Godzilla, you're gonna get a massive kick out of that. And I was really impressed that this movie told that. This is a Japanese film, but regardless where you live, I think you can think of an instance in your country, in your culture, where an event has happened and you have felt the ramifications of that as a civilian, culturally, and that just shockwave is not going away. I mean, in America, in my opinion, it's 9/11, but in this movie, it's Tokyo, and it does that through the main character, this is a pilot movie, this is a war movie, and particularly it's about a kamikaze pilot who abandons his duty to land on an island. He abandons his duty and he fakes that his ship is faulty, and he lands on an island where Godzilla resides, which is just such a crazy... the guy who came up with that is genius.
Good opening.
It's a great opening, and Godzilla's kind of small in this scene. He's kind of feels like he's just a wild animal running through the woods, and then it just escalates over time, and I think this character, he is dealing with PTSD, certainly, but I think more so he's dealing with survivor's guilt. He's dealing with the pressures that were put on him through the Godzilla encounter, and I think that is more widely talking about the pressures that Japanese soldiers had. There is a very pointed moment in this movie where the pilot is shocked that his new plane that he gets at the end of the film has an ejector seat. And I think, obviously the soldiers kind of felt like they were put in a situation where they did need to kamikaze. He resisted that. And I think having him be the one that is rebuilding Japan, someone that feels like his war is not over yet. The movie is constantly saying, all the characters are constantly mentioning that they feel their war is not over yet. I thought that was a very cool thing to have Godzilla be the face of that.
Yeah, I think it's really talking about the fact that they didn't feel like they had closure to their conflict.
They didn't feel like
how it ended.
They didn't feel like they had closure, and they felt like they were facing the consequences of it. You know?
I think that what a really cool thing that this movie does is it places a lot of value on the individual people that in maybe other Godzilla movies they just get stepped on and that's it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of empowerment to the people of Japan in this movie, as we're talking about not relying on the military or the government and sticking up for themselves.
Well, I mean,
I thought it was very refreshing.
Not only were they not relying on it, but they had to simply take it into their own hands. I mean, that's going on in the world right now. And it's like, I thought that was really profound, and I think that message is going to connect with people like everywhere.
I think that probably just comes with having Godzilla movies that come from Japan. As you were saying at the beginning of this, they have a lot more to say.
Yeah, it is a very personal character. Imagine if another country took Superman, took Captain America, took Iron Man, whoever you wanted, if another country took James Bond, and they threw him in movies that didn't quite get the essence of the character.
Removed the messaging, removed the thematic stuff.
Godzilla's a lot more than that, and I think a lot of people are going to come out of this movie, myself included, feeling that more than ever. You particularly want to talk about like the presentation of Godzilla in this.
I think something that's really lost with a lot of these movies and like the monsterverse is that, like you said, he's an action figure. They also give him this like heroic side, which definitely shows like a cultural disconnect on what Godzilla was created to be. This movie really brings Godzilla to, back to being, he's an antagonistic presence. He's a horror presence.
I would argue a little bit that the movie starts out where our main character Godzilla does not see him as an aggressor, so Godzilla doesn't go after him.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm going to be honest, in my opinion, I think Godzilla represents America a lot here. So Godzilla doesn't see him as an aggressor, he doesn't go after him, but as the conflict spirals, as Godzilla gets more and more powerful, he has no sort of decision making. He is just completely unbiased. And that is not like healthy. Him at the beginning has a little bit more of a sense of humility where he, the soldiers shoot at him and he fires back. And that feels like the kernel of a conflict.
Yeah.
And then as the movie goes on, it's a massacre. It spirals out to Godzilla not having any discretion, not having any choice in determining why he's killing who he's killing. He's just doing it because Japan in this movie is his enemy.
And I think I'm not above some fun in just seeing like Godzilla fight Mothra. However, I feel like when you take Godzilla back to being an antagonistic presence, I feel like the movie that then kind of forms around him is a lot more interesting. There's a lot more going on, and I think especially you can see this in like some of the stuff like Monarch that's coming out. It makes the human drama a lot more interesting.
Well, I think that is like definitely how I want to punctuate this, is that this is not just a good Godzilla movie. This is just flat out a good blockbuster. This movie is focused on telling a story with characters that I were incredibly interested in, every single one of them. I was very invested, which these monsterverse movies have a reputation of not capturing the attention with the audience. And it also, I think, does something that, Godzilla, the Bryan Cranston one, it does a very good job of holding the Godzilla card. And I think we've kind of gotten trapped in a box where we think that we need to do that. Whereas this movie, Godzilla is like showing up every single act.
He's just there.
Multiple times. Godzilla is a character in this movie that is constantly showing up. He earns being the title character of this film. And I think that is not what I could say for some other movies that we've been getting recently in the MonsterVerse. I was very impressed by that. The whole other thing about it being just a good movie is that if Godzilla's in this a lot, which he is, they are putting a lot of demand on their budget. Godzilla did look shaky at times.
A little bit.
But man, he was there a lot. Like there were clearly some sequences that they invested more into. I think as the movie goes on, Godzilla does look better, which I appreciated. But they were not afraid to use Godzilla. They were not afraid to put a lot of production time into that, and I think that alone made this a good movie. Another thing that I loved about the production of this movie was the set design. So the set design did a very good job of capturing the, just aftermath of Tokyo. But what I loved about it is as the movie went on and as it was healing, there was more lighting, grass was growing. It felt like the city was gaining its life. Every single time the plot would pivot back to Tokyo, it was in a better and better spot as a consequence of what the characters were doing. And the set design really made that happen.
And then he shows back up, and like one of the shots that sticks out to me the most is when he fires his atomic breath on land, and there's just this nuclear ash cloud. Like on top of set design, this movie used color very well.
Yeah, it did.
And that shot was haunting, and it definitely made me feel connected to kind of like a Godzilla story more than just watching like action figures.
Yeah.
And I think my final thoughts on this is that I'm going to pay closer attention to the Godzilla stuff that comes out of Japan. I haven't seen Shin Godzilla. I'm going to probably watch that. I think we're going
to watch it, yes.
We're going to do a larger episode, I think, comparing some different Godzilla works like Monarch, like Shin Godzilla, Godzilla Minus One.
Yeah.
Especially with our resident Godzilla fan Liam when he makes his great return. But as far as this movie goes, I'm gonna give this a 9. Fantastic, one of my favorite movies of the year.
I'm gonna give this a 10. I think this movie, the only thing that I think I've seen this year that was better than it was Oppenheimer, and it's pretty damn close. I'm gonna give this a solid 10 out of 10. This is a must watch. I don't care if you've seen any Godzilla. I don't care if you're a big Godzilla fan. Go watch this movie, whoever you are. It is so good, and please go see it in IMAX. This is for theaters.
Yes.
This is for theaters. It is a blessing that we got to see this in an IMAX theater with a crowd of people that loved Godzilla as much as they did.
And it's quick. This is a lean, focused, well-paced movie.
It's got such good pacing. And I think when movies, when they do the whole like planning for a battle thing, it can drag on. I was so engaged in the thought process that the characters were going in and how to take down Godzilla. And it was this is my final point I want to make. The way that he took Godzilla down, being a kamikaze attack, where he did have that ejector seat option, which I think soldiers were robbed of in World War II, was so profound. I mean, I was like on the edge of tears. This was just like so personal to the people of Japan. And it was so well built up from the first scene. I mean, it was so organic. It summed up a lot. It made me understand the struggle of World War II soldiers in Japan a lot more.
The way that they felt their lives didn't have value other than as a sacrifice.
And
how that was not lost on them on how unfair that was.
Yeah, and I thought the payoff and it wouldn't have worked without the emotional core of this movie being as good as it was, with the romance and the family aspect and the friendship and the brotherhood. It was perfect.
And allowing good, endearing characters to actually go against Godzilla as a threat.
If I was to sum up the way that this movie approaches Godzilla differently than other films, it is, because I talked about earlier how I thought Godzilla lended itself, you would think that Godzilla lends itself more to a crisis attack situation, but the characters in this movie say, and this movie does not hide what it's commentating on, it does not hide what it's trying to say, which I love. They say, this is not a fight to the death, this is a fight for our life and our future. And that, to throw a character that we relate to damage and destruction into a scenario like that, was so eloquently pulled off. This is 10 out of 10. That's all I got.
Judging from the fact that we just gave a whole other piece about the movie after our ratings, we loved it, and for that, I'm going to bump it up to a 10.
Yeah.
We're going to give this a 10.
Go watch it. Let us know what you think, and unless you got anything, that's all I got.
Nope, 10 out of 10.
All right.